I want to start this by saying I am not an authority of any kind. I don't have a degree. I haven't done research. I have no business acumen. I have no stories of grand achievement. What I am familiar with is failure. I have failed in almost every way a man can, and I live with the consequences of those failures every day. But failure, stripped of emotional load and pain, is just data. This didn't work. I know a lot about what doesn't work. If you're honest with yourself, you realize that's all anyone ever knows. Here is what I ask. Don't believe me. Don't take me seriously. Don't take anything I say for granted. But please listen. Listen without any assumption. My only goal is to explore. I have no answers, so please don't ask for any. This isn't advice, it's an examination of how the ego forms, why it exists, and how it quietly runs our lives. Also, if this overlaps with things you've heard elsewhere, that's not proof. It just means humans keep noticing the same patterns. Let's begin. 1. What is the ego? First, a clarification. When I talk about the ego, I do not mean pride or vainglory. I am speaking of the self, the I, the me, the sense of being a conscious entity with a history that has continuity across time. From all the best evidence, the human being is an animal shaped by evolution. Every aspect of our physical form was created by this blind force, from our fingernails to our hair to our lungs. Everything about us is a tool that helps us survive in a given environment. So, the ego must be one such tool. If the ego is a tool, what function does it serve? It appears to me that the ego is the locus of the survival instinct. Because without I, without me, there is no reason to defend life, resources, or mates. If we were to think in terms of machinery, and animals are organic machines, the ego is a kind of operating software. A simple way to describe it that I found says that operating software is the software that manages all of the computer's resources to make sure all of the other software that wants to use those resources can do so in an orderly fashion. But computer software is built to solve problems, to give an accurate answer. Human software, on the other hand, is made to survive. And those are two different goals, resulting in vastly different outcomes to the same input. Neither is wrong or right, they just serve different purposes. So, that's the ego. Now, we need to explore how the ego is made, how it functions, and how early experiences in childhood can have such a profound effect on how the human system functions in the world. 2. Ego function. If you pay attention, you'll realize that your memory only goes back so far. You don't remember your birth, thank God. You don't remember your mom and dad wiping you. You don't remember sitting in your high chair. That's because you didn't have an ego. Remember, one of the functions of the ego is to provide continuity across time. So any memory you have is part of your ego because it's part of the continuity. However, while your ego didn't exist, your body did. The physical body exists before the ego is constructed, absorbing information about its environment for years, which is the process that eventually leads to your ego solidifying. So, how does the ego crystallize into its first solid iteration? Again, your ego is a survival mechanism. It exists to protect you. When you are born, you are a purely innocent being, just receiving an onslaught of data from your environment. And at some point, something bad happens. A wound is formed. This wound can be large or small in severity, anything from horrible abuse to the simple fact that your parents didn't have a lot of time for you because of work. I want to emphasize here, the point is not that every child is abused. It is that all of us are eventually confronted by a dangerous reality, and that confrontation wounds us. This wound can take many shapes and expresses itself differently in behavior, but all wounds that I've been able to trace at their core collapse into some version of I am unworthy. Now you may ask, why do you say that? When you are a child, you have child logic. And child logic doesn't understand the complexities or nuances of adult psychology, morality, or social interaction. In addition, children are helpless. They are physically smaller, weaker, and less capable. A child really has no recourse against whatever agenda their parents, or whoever is raising them, has. Given these realities, you have to figure out a survival strategy that is effective in your childhood environment. Survival is dependent on threat management. What can harm me, and how do I avoid it? But again, there's very little you can do about any of it. If your parent wants to hit you, you can't stop them. If they want to yell, you can't out yell them. If they want to take something away, you can't take it back. You are totally at their whim. And this is completely unacceptable to the body. To be in a situation where it is in danger and has no effective way to eliminate or at least mitigate danger. When a child is yelled at, they don't think, Mom is stressed out because of bills, because there's nothing they can do about that. They have no control. When they're beaten, they don't think, Dad is an alcoholic, because again, there's nothing they can do about that. They have no control. And rather than accept that they have no control in a dangerous environment, they instead assume that the behavior being acted out on them is their fault. If Mom yells at them, I must have been bad. If Dad beats them, I must deserve it. If the parents don't spend time with them, I must deserve to be alone. Because if the parent's behavior is the child's fault, then the child can change it because the child can change their own behavior. This is what I mean when I say that the ego is formed around a wound. The ego seeks control it doesn't have, and therefore creates a conspiracy theory that allows it to have that illusory control. In consequence, our conscious existence is being controlled by a subconscious assumption that we are unworthy. This assumption has massive implications for the rest of our lives, and when it goes unquestioned and unchallenged, it can lead to severe mental illness, extreme behavior, and ultimately a miserable life. Let's explore how. 3. Environment shift. Eventually, hopefully, we leave our parents' or caretakers' homes and enter the world. It's an exciting time in life. You're finally on your own. You won't make your parents' mistakes. You won't waste your potential. The world is your oyster, and you are going to win. When we are children, we long to explore, we long to be in control, we long to be in charge. We simply can't imagine that the real world could be worse than what we went through as a child. And we survived our childhood, so we must be able to survive the world. And then the world comes around the corner and slams its knee into your balls and shits down your throat. We don't know what we don't know, but we find out. And the problem is, the ego has had typically around 20 years to figure out how to survive in your childhood environment. Even the worst parents have some kind of pattern, some kind of observable habit, something that you can manipulate to increase your survival odds. The world has none of that. The world is vastly less predictable, less personal, and far less forgiving. So the survival strategies that have worked your entire life for 2 decades are suddenly trash, irrelevant, not useful, badly mapped. Which means that you have to completely reinvent your survival strategy. Which means you have to completely reinvent yourself. Because you are an ego, and the ego is made of its survival strategies. Is it any wonder so many young people experience severe mental illness right after they leave their parents' home? You walk out of whatever nightmare or dream you've experienced throughout childhood, and you find out that not only did your childhood not prepare you for the real world, in many ways, it disabled your ability to function in it at all. Because certain survival strategies that worked well at home will get you killed in the real world, or worse. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human in a system that changed faster than you could. So, you either update, which takes years of therapy and a mountain of work that you will have to pay others to help you with, or you muscle through. Because let's be real, the world doesn't give you a whole lot of space to heal. The world cares about profitable results and efficiency, and healing often has no profitable results and is rarely efficient. Some of us are capable of muscling through. They are miracles in their own right. And some of us can't. Our survival strategy doesn't function, so our ego doesn't function, so we don't function. Which eventually leads to a total breakdown of some kind and magnitude. This is where severe mental illness can take root, and where what we later call evil often begins, not as monstrosity, but as a survival strategy that never updated. Let's walk through it. 4. Mental illness. I've established, to the best of my ability, that the ego is a kind of survival software running on organic wetware. If this is the case, then it changes how we view mental illness. Mental illness has, throughout our history, been an affliction that leads to isolation, pain, and death. It is rarely understood, rarely given compassion, and rarely given effective treatment. This is because it is largely viewed as a physical issue. Chemical and electrical misfiring lead to delusion, fantasy, magical thinking, and socially unacceptable behavior, up to and including violence. But the problem is that the human body is not just a physical entity. It is a mental, and in my opinion, a spiritual one. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'll leave out the spiritual aspects, because that would turn this video into a dissertation rather than an obese chain smoker shooting the shit. To reiterate, the human being is an animal, and animals are organic machines, and the brain is the computer that controls our functions. Now, Imagine your desktop computer running with malware. What happens? It malfunctions. It gives bad or false responses. It operates slower. There are pop ups of nonsense. And most importantly, it can overheat. The brain and the ego have a similar reciprocal relationship. The physical brain is a kind of prediction machine. It tries to map reality and produce action that leads to survival. The ego is survival software running in that machine. So if your ego is based on a faulty assumption, I am unworthy, it won't interact with the physical mechanism of the brain the way it is supposed to. It's really not that much different than two gears binding up. Eventually, something has to give. If the ego refuses to update, it damages the physical brain, which in turn damages the ability of the ego to function. It becomes a vicious chicken or the egg cycle. If the ego is given the opportunity to realize that it isn't functioning, and it puts in the requisite effort to change this, healing is possible. At a certain point, full recovery may no longer be possible, but management, stability, and meaningful life often still are. Then we bring in medication. Because of the assumption that mental illness is a product of strictly physical issues, we use chemicals to alter the physical function of the brain. But the problem is not only the physical, it is the mental. It doesn't matter what kind of hardware upgrade you give your desktop computer. If you have a Trojan horse, it is going to crash. This is why medication often, at best, makes symptoms bearable instead of leading to actual long-term healing. We're tightening bolts when the programming is what's fucked. With this in mind, some of the side effects of these medications make more sense. Many of these medications affect neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to physically change. But change can be positive or negative. If we increase neuroplasticity without addressing the underlying ego assumptions driving behavior and perception, we risk reinforcing the very patterns causing harm. And looking at the world as it exists, you can see this everywhere. And here's the thing, this can be tested. Not yet. We don't know how to evaluate the ego as software. But when one day we do, it will be possible to compare the interaction between ego function and brain degradation and the effect that drugs that change neuroplasticity have on this relationship. I'm not claiming this explains all mental illness, but I believe it explains far more than we currently acknowledge. And to be explicitly clear, I am not advocating that anyone stop or adjust their medications based on this video. I am not a doctor. I have no authority. If you are suffering from a mental illness, you need to seek and maintain contact with the appropriate medical counsel and figure out a plan with their help. Do not stop taking your meds if they are helping you stay alive and functional. Survival comes first, always. I'd look into this, but I work in fast food. Somebody with a degree in funding needs to figure this shit out and fast. Because if we can, well, I won't hold my breath. But people are being treated as broken machines when they're running corrupted software, and that's killing them. 5. Ego and evil. This section is going to be very difficult for many of you, so I'm going to try to communicate to the best of my ability. But again, I'm not trained. My only higher education is in HVAC, and I can barely function delivering pizza. I only ask that you give this discussion an honest chance. Try not to immediately cut it off with emotion. I do not say this to condescend. I am not smarter than you. I do not know more than you. I am not better than you. But if we want this world to change, if we want things to get better, we have to talk about uncomfortable subjects with dispassion. The goal is to solve a problem, not to judge. That being said, I understand if something that follows is simply something that you cannot accept. Life is brutal, and all of us get hurt. If your wound is too great, I understand. But as a piece of advice from a man who's ruined his life before, metabolizing pain isn't easy, but letting it go unaddressed will hurt far more. Treat yourself with love and gentleness. You deserve it. Let's continue. Good and evil are moral categories, but morality is loaded with an incredible amount of bias. What's good or evil changes vastly by time, place, and culture. So instead of thinking in terms of something as fuzzy as morality, let's talk in terms of behavior. A behavior is simply a category of human action. This is, admittedly, still somewhat fuzzy because there are many behaviors that you can't define but know when you see, like porn. But it is less fuzzy than morality and removes emotion from the equation. Instead of good and evil, we have action. And action can be evaluated, described, and changed. All behaviors at their base come from some sort of belief structure. If you want to know what someone believes, don't listen to what they say, look at what they do. Now, what is a belief? A belief is a single or set of assumptions that act as a lens through which we view reality, and thus dictates our ability to interpret and interact with it. These are often a priori, by the bootstraps, assumptions. The ego functions according to these belief structures, all of which are branches from a core root belief. And as claimed earlier, the core belief of the ego is a sense of unworthiness. When unquestioned, unchallenged, and unexplored, our basic existence is one of scarcity. When you believe you are not enough, that affects every thought, word, and decision you make. You are permanently in a state of, I do not have enough. You have at your center a great pit. So you go to the external world to try and fill that pit. But it never fills because it cannot be filled. It must be healed. Let's give an example of how this works. If you are a parent, you will recognize this, and if not, you will likely remember yourself doing this when you were a child. A child wants a toy, or to go play, or some such thing. They go to a parent and ask them if they can do or have what they want. The parent says no. The child still wants to do or get what they want, so they come up with a strategy to acquire it. They will go to the other parent, who often has different standards, and ask them. When that parent says yes, and the child does or gets what it wants, instead of both parents uniting and reprimanding the child, there is a chance the parents will argue with each other, and the child will get away with their disobedience. The child wins. The behavior is rewarded. And what happens when behavior is rewarded? The child learns that that behavior worked, that the child can get what they want by lying and manipulating. Now, if you really think about this, this is a horrendous evil that's played out in miniature across millions of homes all over the world, because the child has potentially damaged their parents' relationship simply to get a toy. I'm not saying the child is evil. I'm saying the pattern is dangerous if it's rewarded and never corrected. This is one of the earliest places narcissistic or psychopathic patterns can begin to take shape. A survival strategy that worked. I am going to attempt to map the process that leads from base ego assumption to unacceptable behavior in this scenario. I may not get every step, or I may not explain it in the most elegant way, but I believe I can capture the shape of the thing. 1. I am unworthy. 2. I don't have enough. 3. This toy or activity will make me feel like I have enough, which will make me worthy. 4. Asks for toy or activity. 5. Is told no. 6. If I don't have this toy, I won't have enough. And if I don't have enough, I am still unworthy. 7. I can lie or manipulate to get what I want, and getting what I want will make me worthy. 8. Tells the lie or manipulates. 9. Lie or manipulation works. 10. Child gets what they want. 11. Parental fallout. 12. Child's behavior is not corrected and therefore rewarded. 13. I lied or manipulated and got what I wanted, and nothing happened to me. I became worthy for a moment because of this strategy. If I am correct, and the pattern is at least close to this, why wouldn't this child grow into an adult who lies and manipulates to get what they want? And the awful truth is, if they're good at lying or manipulating, they will get what they want as an adult. And we all know that. Now apply this logic to any other behavior that we call evil. I am not claiming that this explains everything, but I think this picture makes more sense than most of the others we use. 6. What to do. If I am correct, we have a serious problem on our hands. But this argument explains a mountain of human behavior and interaction, and they explain something that many of us don't want to admit. We argue constantly about politics, especially in this era. We all seem to think that the right law passed, the right politician elected, the right system adjusted, and we will be able to create a world that finally leads to something worth living in. But every revolution has failed. No matter how many elites we kill, no matter how many rich we eat, no matter how many statues we tear down, the same problems persist, just perpetrated by different people with different clothes. Because the problem isn't the system. Fixing the external world will never solve the problem. It never has. Because the problem is internal. Our very existence, the function of our basic programming, dooms us to failure. Sounds a lot like original sin, don't it? I'll let that go. But let it percolate in your mind. See what flows downstream. And now the rubber meets the road. What on earth do we do? It seems that existence itself made us wrong, that all of this was completely inevitable. And once you understand the function of the ego, its structure, how it's formed, the entirety of human history turns into a complete, unavoidable tragedy perpetrated by a cruel universe that laughs at our misery. I won't talk about spirituality. I know many of you don't want to have that conversation. And honestly, to explain what I think is happening would require something of the length and quality of a professional novel. Maybe I'll get to that one day. We'll see how this video does and what interest is like. But there is hope. There is reason to keep getting up. You don't have to carry the moral weight of existence. Someone already did. But for now, in this life, in this world, what do? First, we have to accept reality as it is. The problem has never been the world. It has never been politics. It has never been anything external. It has always been internal. It has always been us. Not in the sense of blame, but in the sense of responsibility. We have to change. We have to interrogate the underlying assumptions and beliefs that cause our behavior. And we have to face the original wound that our ego was formed around. The difficulty is that no one can do this for you. And you can't do this for anyone else. You can get help, resources exist, but it's up to you. These are your wounds. Only you can heal them. Because the truth is, this world, it's nobody's fault. That doesn't mean no one caused harm, but it means that it is on us in our own lives to purge the pus, sew the wound, apply antiseptic, and heal. That's the only thing you can do. It's your only shot. Good luck, my friend. Welcome to Earth.